innovative and award-winning public relations campaigns. My name is David, and I am one of the public relations students at Munster Technological University, and we're organising 2 online events as part of our events management module. I'll mention briefly about the second event at the end to the audience, very briefly. I promise I won't take up a lot of your time. But as regards this first event, we're organising it as part of Innovation and Enterprise Month here at MTU. So there's been plenty of talks and discussions and webinars and workshops that have been going on over the past couple of weeks, and will continue on into the month of March. So to the audience members, if you'd like to check out more about that, you can do that by logging on to the MTU website. But this is the most important one. You chose well today. So we're going to be discussing 3 award-winning public relations campaigns, and we're going to be also talking about the awards for excellence in PR themselves. For the 3 campaigns we'll be discussing, we are joined by Niamh Murphy from the Events, Tourism and Communications Agency. So hello, Niamh.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
So Niamh was working on a campaign called The Shop That Nearly Wasn't in conjunction with Breakthrough Cancer Research. And the focus of the campaign was on a shop that was entirely stocked and staffed by cancer survivors in order to raise awareness and funds for the work of Breakthrough Cancer Research. So we're going to be talking to Niamh about that campaign. We'll also be talking to Ciara Byrne, who's here from Dogs Trust Ireland. So hello, Ciara.
Hiya.
So Ciara is going to be talking about a campaign. It's actually a campaign that Dogs Trust run every year, but we're going to be looking at it in 2019, and that is A Dog is for Life, Not Just for Christmas. And the campaign looked to get to the root of the issue as to families adopting dogs around Christmas time as a present for their kids. But unfortunately then in January, realizing how hard it is to have a dog in your lives, and then unfortunately having to surrender the dog over to Dogs Trust. So we're going to be talking to Ciara a bit more about that campaign, how that came about. And we're also going to be talking to Fiona Hanna, who's here from Jago Communications. So hello, Fiona.
Hello.
So Fiona was involved in a campaign called We've Come a Long Way in conjunction with Tourism Northern Ireland. 2019 was a massive year for Northern Ireland with so many things going on. And as the name suggests as well, it was about overcoming, I suppose, certain challenges of the past. So very cool campaign. We're going to be talking to Fiona about that. So those are the 3 campaigns. And in order to get an insight into the awards for excellence in PR themselves, we're going to be talking to Dr. Martina Byrne. Hello, Martina.
Hello, David. Hello, everybody in Cork. Good to see you again.
So Martina is the head of the Public Relations Institute of Ireland and the Public Relations Consultants Association that arranged the awards. We're going to be talking to Martina about how a campaign gets chosen, what goes into that, and the process involved. So brilliant. Now, audience, if you have a question at any point, having a look here just to see, okay, yeah, there's plenty of attendees flooding in now, fantastic. If you have a question at any point, if you'd like to talk about a specific campaign or about the awards themselves, then you can float a question into the Q&A box, should be there at the bottom on your right. You can put it in there, and what I'll ask you to do is make sure at the start that you put in the name of the speaker that you're addressing the question towards, and then your question. So for example, to Fiona, question, okay? If you'd like to ask more of kind of an open question that's not about a specific campaign or about the awards that you'd like everyone's thoughts on, then you can put to everyone at the start and then your question. That's just to kind of help me out, audience, so that I have some sort of clue as to what's happening. Brilliant. And as well to the speakers, if you have a question at any point for your fellow speakers, then absolutely ask away, go for it. Okay, brilliant. I will actually stop talking eventually at some point, I'd say, and let the speakers actually speak. All right, brilliant. Thanks very much to the 4 of you for agreeing to be a part today. I know you're all very busy, so it's really appreciated that you took the time out to be a part of today. I might just, actually, we were kind of touching on, I suppose, briefly, just as the audience are coming in, and I might just ask the 4 of you, just before we get to the individual chat. Obviously, like a lot of industries have been shut down, obviously, over the past year because of COVID. How have the 4 of you, like in your workplaces, how have you been kind of able to adapt? I might just start with Fiona. Like, have you thought, Fiona, there's been like a lot of lulls, I suppose, in work, or have you been just as busy?
David, probably actually the opposite, because a lot of the companies have actually really required PR and comms help, because they usually on kind of their normal course of how they approach every year. But then last March, really they were going on different tracks. They were adapting themselves, and they really needed the comms help, to help in terms of adapting to, and that was across a full range of audiences, whether that's customers or potential customers, current or potential, as I said, or even internal. So, for example, we did see more of our even current clients that might not have required as much internal comms as previously, that they were turning to us to say, can you really help with building that momentum as a team, communicating with our team that are working from home? So, for example, that's a really good example of how there was actually more. So I think, yeah, you might have expected that there might be a lull or such, but actually probably quite the opposite. And we found that people really turned to PR and comms for help, and actually found it so valuable, and could really see the impact of it in terms of helping them kind of work through this, and communicate in a much different way than they had previously.
Okay, yeah. Niamh, would you agree with Fiona? Have you kind of seen something similar?
Yeah, I suppose definitely communications has become, really important, and probably never so more so. I suppose from our own business, it's been really industry specific. So some areas have been annihilated and other areas are growing. So, I mean, we're ETC, the Events, Tourism and Communications Agency. The first two back in March just went overnight. And we would have, started working more with clients in tech and healthcare and so on, which is booming. But since then, it's become really busy, because all of those tourism clients and all of those event clients, they don't want to stay silent forever. So now they're adapting. So we're doing virtual events like what you're doing today. We're taking festivals online. And there's actually more work in all of that. So yeah, I mean, thankfully this year is looking, really, really good so far, I suppose. Yeah.
It's good. Ciara, how have you been kind of finding the last year?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's a lot of restructuring that has to go on. We're not doing a lot of the same things, but we're doing a lot of things. And it's just about restructuring and remodeling and looking at where the need is greatest, really. And PR and comms is absolutely at the center of all of it, especially with things like internal communications, which is really, really important for us now more than ever. We've actually grown our internal comms projects, and while there was a lot of things that were kind of long-term plans have kind of been pushed forward more so now. In terms of our overall business, we are extremely busy, but we're busy in different ways. So really it is all about restructuring and trying to accommodate that restructure. And that's where, and PR and comms in particular, as the girls were saying, the ladies were saying, that there's a lot of PR events and things that we would have done outdoor that are now turned to virtual. So we are still busy. We're still, business as usual, but we're just focusing on our PR and comms in a very different way.
Okay, cool. And to yourself, Martina, how have you would you agree with the three ladies, or?
Absolutely. Every single thing they've said. And we're in the position at the Institute, and in my position over both organizations, just to see it across the way. So the sort of umbrella view. Let's be honest, we were all very scared this time last year. Not least because I would say a minority had any experience of working from home or working remotely. Just wasn't a tradition, really. So there was the getting to grips with running active campaigns and managing client relationships and managing team relationships and working coherently but apart, which was scary, but people really adapted to it very, very well. I was just writing for today's newsletter that, I was suggesting that members take a moment and reflect on all that they've achieved in the past year. They've done things you know, as Ciara, Niamh and Fiona were saying, that they never had to do before, wouldn't have expected to do, probably wouldn't even have challenged themselves to do, and yet they did and they delivered. And we're seeing that across the board in all of the activities. And recruitment. We must be one of the minority of sectors who have seen an increase in recruitment in the last few months. And indeed, recruitment held up right through the summer. So that's a very good sign that, and it underpins everything that you've heard, that communications has, it's not so much that it's come into its own, because you know what, we've always been doing the kind of work that people are noticing now. I think it's that at senior management level, at the C-suite level, as they call it, at the senior client level, they really understand now better than they ever did before how critical communications is to the success or maintenance of an organization. And you know, communications people are getting the ear, so to speak, of senior management in a way they would have struggled to in the past. Because I've often said, it doesn't matter how wonderful your product is or how wonderful your policy is. If you don't get the communications right, not just do communications, because anyone can do communications, but if you don't get the communications right, then however wonderful everything else is, it's not going to succeed long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. I might just stick with yourself there, Martina, and we might just have a bit of a chat about the awards and excellence themselves. So just, I think it was just under 30 years ago, actually, I think is when they first started, was it?
That's right. This year they're in the ripe old age of 28. And that's worth mentioning because that's one of the first indicators that the awards are very popular. And they're very popular because there is a prestige attached to them, as your three winners will know. And that prestige has only grown. So this year, as I was mentioning to you, despite the fact that everybody was working remotely, despite the fact that everybody was working longer and indeed harder because of all of the additional challenges that COVID presented, we have more organizations taking part this year than ever before. And that again is another indication of the positive attitude that people have towards them, and the enjoyment they get out of them as well.
That's fantastic, actually, really, isn't it? That, you know, with so many industries struggling, you know, with this one to actually see kind of more organizations come in than ever before, it's a really great positive message to have, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think you know, the awards have always been about celebration. We kind of would refer to them amongst ourselves as the Oscars. And the awards day is always high glamour stakes. And one of the few days that you don't have to go back to the desk after lunch. And it really is. It's a big day in our calendar. Now, last year, of course, we had to move online, but still, you know, people got huge amounts of satisfaction from being on that shortlist, because it ain't easy to get on the shortlist. And those who won were over the moon. So it's about celebration, because I know the stereotype, of course, is that public relations people spend all their time out on the town and living the glamorous life. And I spent about 30 years in the game, and I can tell you it ain't glamorous. But it's our day out. It's a day when PR people get to go to something that somebody else has organized, because they spend their time organizing big events for other people, you know, for example, like Niamh's company. So this is an opportunity for the PRI and the PRCA to organize a day out for them. And then, of course, there's the serious reasoning behind it. And that is because awards are about competition, and competition is about upping the game and upping the standards. So you know, when the awards are over, that's not the end of it as far as we're concerned. We then take the learnings from the panel of judges. And within a few months, we have events where the judges, usually presented by the chair of the panel of judges, Nessa Kane Fine, and myself, and we go through the learnings. So what do we want to see more of? What do we want to see less of? And that in and of itself then informs the next year's campaigns that are developed by people, and people learn by doing. So there's an opportunity to celebrate, there's an opportunity to learn, and there's also an opportunity for us to showcase exactly what we've been talking about to the wider stakeholders, the external stakeholders, what communications and public relations contributes to the success of organizations, what it contributes to Irish economic life, cultural life, social life, political life. So it's a very hardworking event and a very important one for us.
I might just ask you a bit, I suppose, about the judging panel. So you select a lot of judges from a lot of different areas. Could you maybe talk us through, I suppose, the criteria that goes involved in that? Like, how many judges are there? How did they get selected and all that?
So there's 13 judges. Just realized now, 13. Let's call it lucky 13, okay? And many of those judges have been with us for some years, which we regard as a strength because it builds up almost like a corporate knowledge of the awards, and it builds up a knowledge about the standards that people can be pushed to attain. So they're from all walks of life. Majority are practitioners or former practitioners, so they know the nuts and bolts, and they know what good looks like. And then to add an additional layer, we have some people who are slightly at a remove. So, for example, we have 2 academics from the world of communications, and then we have people who are slightly at another remove again. And we also have, joining us this year, we have Laura Slattery, the media and marketing correspondent from the Irish Times. So we like to think that we have a very wide range of views, but all of whom have at some level an interest and commitment to good quality communications.
Mm. And like, I suppose for the process of judging it, is there kind of an auditing process? Like, I mean, for the amount of submissions you must get, it must take a savage amount of time to kind of absolutely make sure that you have selected the absolute best campaigns that you've come across.
Indeed, there is. So the process begins on the very day that the deadline happens. So we have an internal audit, which begins, and that takes a few days to go through because there are a couple of hundred entries. So there's checks and balances there in terms of sort of the more the tick box or the administrative side of things, you know, that people are eligible to enter, that they've entered the right categories, that they've ticked all the boxes of the information that's requested for each category of award. The next stage then is that all of the entries go to our awards auditor. And in this case, the awards auditor is Sheila Gahan. She has many decades experience working at the highest level in public relations. And she goes through each and every line of each and every entry, practically a full-time job for a few weeks. And what she's looking for there is that the claims that are being made as to why a particular entry is excellent, that they actually stack up. So she'll be checking to make sure that all of the information that was requested is provided, and all the information that was provided is as verifiable and cross-checked as anybody can do. The fact that she's worked in the business for over 30 years means that she has a corporate history of public relations in Ireland as well. So she knows almost the history of various organisations and various campaigns. That's a painstaking task, as you can imagine. And after that, and only after that, do the award entries go to the individual judges. So then the individual judges work by themselves on a selection of entries, and then they come together in small groups, and those small groups are overseen by the chair of the judging panel, who sits on all of the smaller teams. So there's layer upon layer of checks and balances, and that's only fair. People put a lot of work into their entries. There's a lot riding on it, you know, that the prestige is real. So people don't want to miss out, and we don't want somebody to miss out if they're entitled to win. So lots of checks and balances along the way. And then the judges produce a short list and make the final decision altogether as to who is the category winner.
Okay, class. I might just park the conversation for the awards. Thank you very much, Martina. And we'll have a conversation about the 3 campaigns here today. So I might just start talking about the shop that nearly wasn't. So with Niamh. So for the shop that nearly wasn't, winner of the best campaign by a registered charity at the 2020 awards. Can I just ask you, Niamh, I suppose, about that concept of the shop? Like, how did you come up with that? Was that something that ETC came up with, or was that something that Breakthrough actually approached you with? Like, how did that concept kind of come about?
Well, I suppose I've been working with Breakthrough Cancer Research, both professionally and volunteering with them for almost 15 years. But I primarily have worked with them on the PR side over the years. And it was time for them to take their business to the next level. So I recommended a creative strategist partner, Roisin Kuhn from the Brill Building. So I had actually worked with Roisin previously when we both were up in Dublin at the DDF H&B group, now Wunderman Thompson. So I suppose her team developed the big idea, and then an interagency team, which also included a local media buying agency, came together, and we really worked alongside the client. You know, I suppose the team in Breakthrough Cancer Research are incredibly innovative themselves. They're really creative, and together we collaborated and we developed the campaign. I suppose our main remit was on the PR side, was on, you know, grabbing engagement headlines, social media events, influencer engagement, celebrity engagement, and so on. But it probably is one of the best collaborative campaigns I've ever worked on, and I think that's what set it apart. Really, is one of the reasons that set it apart. Yeah.
I suppose, like, from what we've kind of noticed about the campaign, just from looking at it our course, I suppose what kind of set it apart was that you weren't, in terms of the impact on people, you weren't exactly looking to try and appeal to people's sympathy. It was more about creating this positive message. Would you say that that was kind of the key to the success of the campaign?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole concept behind the campaign is to celebrate that, you know, people have survived cancer, and to showcase the creative contributions that those people make to society today, whether it's a painting that they've created, or you know, like I don't know, a tote bag or something, you know, that these people are the artists in our lives that are only here because of cancer research. And the whole campaign, it put a focus on the fact that, you know, there can be more survivors, and there can be 100% survival if more investment is put into cancer research. So it was really positive, and that was the whole focus, as opposed to, I guess, you know, a lot of times with charity campaigns, people can maybe focus more on the negative.
I think a cool part of the campaign was the fact that it wasn't just a shop. You were actually doing events throughout the week on each day as well, weren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose, you know, you have this pop-up shop in the middle of Temple Bar. How do you drive footfall there? You know, other than all of the mass public relations that we generated. I mean, my colleague Maria Rolston, who's on the call, she did Trojan work on actually, you know, securing a lot of media coverage for the campaign. But we also needed to create other reasons to attract people to go to the shop. So, you know, there was numerous events set up, from rugby talks to flower making workshops to yoga sessions and so on. And that all drove additional footfall into the shop. I suppose another interesting thing about it is that in addition to selling, arts and crafts and things created by cancer survivors, in addition to having in events, half of the shop remained empty. And that was really to showcase that there's still so much more that needs to be done. And we need to fill that empty space with more survivors through more cancer research.
And can I ask you as well, like, in terms of approaching people to get involved, as obviously, as you said, everything that was stocked at the shop was made by cancer survivors, jewelry, books, paintings, as well. You approach people for interviews as well. Like, was it difficult in approaching people to open up, obviously, about a extremely personal battle that they went through? Was that difficult, or were people very eager to get involved?
I suppose we left it up to people about how much they wanted to open up or didn't want to open up. The whole campaign was about celebrating survival. And in that respect, a lot of people who actually became part of it said during the week that they felt a sense of elation, that they've made it, they've survived, so they wanted to be part of it. We wanted to showcase these survivors. So in order to reach out to people, we did a soft launch. We didn't tell people what the campaign was about originally. We just asked for makers or creators, who were cancer survivors. And we got really great people like 10-year-old Lily Burke from Cork, who, became one of the faces of the campaign. And we let people share as much as they wanted to. We got a lot of celebrities involved as well. Some people like Michael Flatley just donated a painting and he gave us quotes for the press release and so on. And then other people like Senator David Norris, he did interviews for us throughout the country. He also opened the shop the day it opened, which, gave huge media profile and attracted a lot of media to actually come along to our opening. So from a point of sharing their stories, I think it was a mixed feeling, but the majority were really happy too.
And I suppose, because I think you were looking to reopen the shop again if the demand was there for it, but obviously with the pandemic that came in, it kind of changed things. But could you talk to us a bit about, I suppose, some of the long-term plans that you might have had in mind for the shop?
Well, I suppose firstly, we were so lucky with our timings going in February. We were really strategic about going out for World Cancer Day in February because we wanted to own the national conversation on that day. And I suppose strategically it really worked for us, but it was also very lucky that it was just before the lockdown. We did have plans to do to go to other locations with it. But we actually have a spin out idea that was meant to launch this year for World Cancer Day that's on hold. So watch this space, and in a couple of months you'll see the spin-off idea. So hopefully it might be another award-winning campaign.
Hopefully. As well, because the shop, ETC is based in Cork. I think Breakthrough is based in Cork City as well, is it?
That's it, exactly. So Breakthrough Cancer Research is based in Cork. So they always had a large profile in Cork because they support Cork Cancer Research Centre, which would be very well known. But they didn't have that profile outside of Cork and Munster. So this campaign was about, kind of really getting cut through at national level. Like they're a challenger brand, if you look at it. The Irish Cancer Society would usually own a day like World Cancer Day. They would usually be all over the conversation. So we needed to come up with something creative enough that would, that would set a relatively small charity in Cork up against, I charities nationally.
Cool. Thanks very much, Niamh. Might just scoot over to Ciara, and we'll talk about the campaign that you're involved in. Dog is for Life, not just for Christmas in 2019. So I suppose, Ciara, what happened in 2019? Did you see an increase in dogs being surrendered over to Dogs Trust in January, more so than the past couple of years, was it?
Yeah, well, what we do every year, every Christmas, we sit down. Well, we obviously do the planning a long time before Christmas, but we do sit down and we think every year we launch a campaign, as you said, around Christmas time. So it really just depends. We know that Christmas is a time that people are going to go out and buy a dog, or get a dog. It's not necessarily have to be bought. And this is why we sit down and we think, well, where is the need? What do we need to focus on with the campaign? And sometimes that could be around puppy farming, but this year in particular, we saw an increase in our surrender stats from that year after Christmas of the previous year. So that's why we decided that if there was a real need there to do something this year on that subject. So that's why we picked our A Dog is for Life campaign. Now, a lot of people will know of the slogan, A Dog is for Life, not just for Christmas. And not a lot of people know that that was actually created by Dogs Trust. Our former CEO actually came up with that slogan, and it is it's a slogan that's now copyrighted to Dogs Trust. So we're able to use that. So we kind of thought, what better way to capture what we're trying to say in a nutshell, but A Dog is for Life, not just for Christmas. So we really wanted to get the message out there that if you're going to take on a dog in any shape or form, whether it's buying or whether it's adopting or rescuing, that to really do careful research around that, so that when the kind of the thrill of getting a dog coming up to Christmas time wears off after Christmas, that you won't be left with a dog that you can't care for, or there's a number of different reasons that people might have to give their dog up. So, and it's not just us, it's every charity. I mean, we're just the tip of the iceberg, and a lot of dogs unfortunately end up in the pounds as well, and then dogs can end up being put to sleep. So that's something that we really wanted to raise the importance of, and get those messages out there. So that's kind of why we decided to do it around that. It was based on that increase.
Would you say that the primary audience for this campaign was parents of young children?
Yeah, well, we actually have an education team that go around everywhere around Ireland, educating children on the importance of getting a dog. And usually it's the children that are asking the parents, and then the parents feel that they want to go out and buy the dog for a Christmas present. And it's lovely, and it's a lovely thing. And when I was growing up, I mean, I'm sure I got a dog. One of my dogs was probably bought around Christmas time or for a birthday. And at the moment, we're seeing the COVID dogs as well. So they're dogs being bought for special occasions, because you want to go out and buy a dog, and it's a really exciting thing. So you want to really make a fuss of it and want to make it a really special occasion, and it's a really special occasion. We don't want to take away from that, but there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. Dogs aren't a commodity. They aren't an impulse buy. They're not something that when you're fed up with, or your kids are tired with, that they can just be put in a box or put in a cupboard and you don't have to think about them for another couple of years. They're a 13 to 15 year commitment. Some dogs live longer, some dogs don't live that long, but it really is a huge commitment, not just the time, but financially as well. The training that needs to go into a dog. There's so many things that need to go in to create a really well-rounded dog, and all those things need to be carefully considered before taking one on, because if you don't put in those basic training and don't give the dog all the attention that it needs, especially in those first few months, that's when the behavioral issues can start down the line. And that's where we see an awful lot of dogs ending up in the pound system or ending up being surrendered to a rescue centre. So that's really what we're trying to put the prevention measures in place before that people get the dog. We have a 2-tiered system. We have prevention and cure. And we ultimately don't want to be working on the curative part. We don't want to see the dogs ending up in the shelters. We want to work on the prevention so that they don't end up in that situation in the first place. And it's so distressing for a dog. We of course, us and many other charities are there to pick up the pieces, and we do that, and we do give the dog new homes where we can. And some dogs do go on to live very happy lives after, but we really just, some dogs are traumatized by the whole situation. They're frightened, the whole experience of being abandoned in the first place. what happened to my parents? Where did they go? How come I had this lovely family and now they're gone? And now I'm with these strangers, you know. So it's really distressing for a dog, and it's something that we just don't want to see happen at all to begin with.
Mm. And I just want to go back to something you said there. You said that you mentioned that you have like an educational team that goes around to educate kids on what goes into caring for a dog. So you were quite conscious of how, not just how adults would take in the message of the campaign, but also children as well.
Yeah, well, that's just, sorry, to go back to your original point. We with this campaign, we don't target children with our PR campaigns. The parents are the people that we're targeting. So if we're in whatever we're doing, you know, we're looking at the parents. So if we're targeting through national media, radio, we want to focus those PR tools on looking at the parents. But then because we know that the parents are the ones that are going to be on social media, and they're going to be the ones reading the papers, and they're going to be the ones listening to the radio ads and watching the television ads, and they're going to be the ones that really are able to absorb that information and that messaging through those channels. But we have an education team for our children, and they actually go to they arrange workshops with children. They go into schools. Before COVID, obviously, they were going into schools and physically delivering workshops there. Now it's all online based, but they're still doing it. And they're doing those programs with children. And there's a very different way of communicating with children. And we feel that it's best and it's best absorbed through our education team and through delivering those key messages through education workshops where they come in and they explain things in a way that children will understand. And what we often find is that the children will go home to their parents and say, actually, Mum, do you know what? Let's not get that dog this year. Let's wait until, you know, and we teach them all of those really valuable things, and we show them obviously in a really nice way, without shocking. And we're very much about that. We don't want to use any shock tactics on children, especially when it comes to animals. But we really wanted to hammer home that message for kids so that they understand. You know, you might think it's all great to, you know, get a new dog and you're going to walk it and you've all these great aspirations, but actually, you know, next year you still want to be doing all these things when you're busy and you want to go out with your friends, and you know what will happen to the dog then. And we really try and get those key messages, the same as the messages that we deliver through our PR campaigns, but we still try and get those messages to children in more child-friendly language and really explaining. And ethics is another big part of our work as well, and we do that with children as well, and really get them debating the subject and talking about it and get those conversations started with kids. And they just love that. They love, you know, talking, debating and talking those different moral dilemmas that you might have with, especially when it comes to animals and dogs.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Ciara. Might just scoot over to Fiona and have a bit of a conversation on the campaign that you worked on. We've come a long way. So We've Come a Long Way, actually, how many people worked alongside you for that campaign, Fiona?
So we, at the time, we were an agency and there was about a team. It varied throughout the year depending on the different tactics throughout the calendar year. But, you know, if we started the year with a huge event, so a lot of us were working on that in terms of across our agency. So there might have been between kind of 5 and 7 of us. But then at different stages throughout the campaign, it might have just been 1 or 2 working on something specifically. But yeah, at the time, our agency, we were, I think, around, between 5 and 7. And then obviously working really collaboratively with the client as well, and their PR teams within Tourism Northern Ireland.
Okay. I suppose like this was such a massive campaign, like, you know, obviously people, and as I'd say the other speakers would agree, that the public would see obviously the cool things that you're doing, and specifically with this campaign, like the red carpet event that you did, the video with Neil Delamere, and the open letters where you could hit the ball through the letter. Oh, I wish I did that. That seems like great crack. People see all that and they don't probably realize the amount of research and analysis that goes into it before you even start formulating ideas. Could you kind of maybe talk to us a bit about that period? How involved were you in that, and how long did that kind of take?
Well, yeah, very involved in it. And I suppose this conversation, we knew that the Open was coming to Northern Ireland, well in advance. So the conversations around, well, what would the communications be for the tourist board for that year? This was the biggest event that Northern Ireland has ever hosted. But we didn't want, obviously, for the tourist board and for Northern Ireland, this was a huge opportunity. But it wasn't to be all about golf. It had to be about the destination and other things and using it and leveraging it, yes, but very much focusing on the destination. So that was a challenge because we needed to, yes, be part of the conversation, but not just about golf. We needed the conversation to be about Northern Ireland as a whole. And as part of that, research was really key. One of the big piece of research was done just the year before, or about a year and a half before, particularly looking at the ROI market, which showed so much potential from people from the Republic of Ireland to visit Northern Ireland. And that was kind of one of the key parts of our brief, that we needed to persuade people from the Republic of Ireland to visit Northern Ireland, not just for the Open. Yes, that was happening within this year, but really that it was throughout the whole year and to leave a legacy for it. So it was about managing all that and building a strategy around it. But our comms also had to hit the whole island. So we really had two very separate markets. We have our Northern Ireland market and our domestic tourists that think they probably know everything about tourism in Northern Ireland. They live there, they're highly familiar with it. So they were, our research showed that they actually just felt, there wasn't much buzz domestically as well. So we had to drive civic pride, that we have been awarded international accolades by Lonely Planet. This was the biggest event that was ever going to come to Northern Ireland. This is something we should be really, really proud of. And then very much in the Republic of Ireland market, there was fantastic research, which is so good for us that we can build any comm strategy based on research of what people thought and what the Republic of Ireland market thought of Northern Ireland. And there were really interesting stats around that. I think the one that always stood out for us within that research is the fact that 50% of people in the Republic of Ireland had never been to Northern Ireland, and they had all these kind of probably misconceptions about it. And obviously there's a legacy there as well. So we needed to think of an all-encompassing strategy that worked for both markets, but that we could tailor the tactics and the comms slightly. And that's where really we've come a long way came from, because it worked for the domestic market, because it was kind of shaking our domestic market to say, guys, we've come a long way. Look how far we've come. Lonely Planet, the Open, the screen tourism, Game of Thrones, Dairy Girls, this is all happening in your home turf. So we've come a long way. But it also really worked for Republic of Ireland, because it said to people, you might have conceptions about what Northern Ireland, what it's like to visit there, but actually we've come a long way. So it worked in both markets, and then we really just built our strategies around it. So yeah, the research was just brilliant, and we love working with research, because then we can actually tailor our messages to really hit people at the right time and say the right things. So, but it really was challenging. Like you might think, because you have these big events and things that are actually happening, but the media coverage, we needed to be part of that conversation and a big part of it. We didn't want it just to be about, this golf competition's happening a week in Northern Ireland. We needed to be, it's happening in Northern Ireland because it's a fantastic place. There's so much to do. You can visit all year round. You can go for a whole weekend break, see things that you might not have ever expected to see, and build on that knowledge that for people, and making sure that that was part of the conversation as well.
Class. And I suppose, like, with everything that was going on, the British Open and the last season of Game of Thrones, which was amazing, the new season of Dairy Girls and everything else that was going on, did you yourself kind of feel maybe a bit more pressure to make sure, God, we got to get this right, maybe than anything else you might have worked on? Or was it just another day at the office?
Definitely. No, there definitely was pressure, because it's all based on, literally a tourism strategy for the economy. and it had to drive the visitor numbers. This was one shot, one chance to do it. Obviously build on it year on year, but this was a big year, and if we didn't deliver, it was going to be a missed opportunity. So yeah, in short, it was a lot of pressure, and to make sure we didn't miss anything. So it was very busy, and you could have just focused on golf, you could have just focused on screen, but we needed to encapsulate it all and go on the journey with it. And things were a little bit reactive as well. Like there were points where we didn't know that Dairy Girls necessarily was going to air within the next month, and then that was announced, so we needed to build that into our strategy, because people are going to be talking about dairy. How do we make sure that they positively talk about dairy and think, do you know what, I'm actually going to visit dairy, that'll be a lovely, I've watched the program, it looks like a good place, or whatever it might be. And then building those tourism messages around it, not that it's not just about the plot. We're being part of the conversation in a way that actually encourages people to go.
Class. Savage. Brilliant. We will have a look at the questions in the old Q&A box there in a second, but I suppose, Martina, just to ask you one question briefly, just before we go to some audience questions. I mean, having a look there at the 3 outstanding campaigns that we were just discussing there, for yourself, like, in your own opinion, I know these 3 campaigns were in 3 different categories, but like, what to you kind of separates a campaign from, yeah, that was pretty good, to, okay, yeah, that was exceptional, now we need to recognize that?
Well, I think the 3 case studies that you've picked, and there's over 25 categories, so in any one year you could have picked any other selection. You picked 3, and I think those 3 each and together exemplify best practice. So you just heard Fiona talking about how central research was. You get the research right, then the rest of the program, the rest of the campaign, rooted in that, is going to deliver. And notice, she mentioned, yes, media coverage. That's not what they got an award for. That's not why Northern Ireland Tourism was so pleased with their work. They got the visitors there. That's what they set out to do. They had a timeline to do it, and they got the visitors to visit. Niamh's campaign, same thing. She's talked about all the different things that they did, but just look at the spark of creativity in that one line, the shop that nearly wasn't. I defy anyone to see that written down and not go, what's that?
Yeah.
It's absolutely gripping. And then it makes sense when you hear what underpinned that line. And again, Niamh talks about the publicity that they garnered, but at the end of the day, they fundraised, they created huge awareness for, to be honest, an organisation and work that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Cancer research, not something that immediately we spring to mind, but they have seeded, as in SEEDED, they've seeded now knowledge and information in people's heads about the importance of investing in research, and that investing in research isn't some intangible scientific endeavor. It means that real people go on to live the rest of their real lives. And in terms of Ciara's work, one of the things that jumped out at me when I remember reading that entry was, I never knew that it was the Dogs Trust that invented the phrase, a dog's not just for Christmas, it's for life. Honest to God, I didn't. And I didn't know, oh gosh, here comes a pun. Be careful, everyone. I didn't know the pedigree of that expression.
Very good. Very good.
And I'm here all week. And, the Dogs Trust, in a way, they have a difficult battle to climb, because, okay, I would joke, but they have the most wonderful collateral and content. I mean, get me looking pictures of puppies all day, I'm happy out. But they also have the difficulty that everybody does know them, and everybody does know what they do. So they have to work even harder to get cut through and to get people to really sit up and take notice. And what I loved, again, was the central position that research played in the Dogs Trust campaign, because they didn't just fall into the trap of going, oh, who needs to know about this? Everybody needs to know about this. The general public, no. They looked at it really, really carefully, and they sliced and diced their target audiences, and they looked at parents. They looked at parents in a particular age group. Interestingly, they also looked at young people who were setting up their own first sort of household. That jumped out at me. I wouldn't have thought of that now. And I'm guessing that again was underpinned by research. So they knew exactly who they needed to talk to, and they knew exactly what they needed to tell them. And if I can just say one more thing, they also knew when to talk about it. You don't talk about it the week before Christmas. Why? Because mommy and daddy have already decided that Johnny's getting a puppy. And what are they going to do then? Go into the shops looking for a replacement toy? I don't think so. So like other organizations, they research when is the best time for that messaging to drop. That is critically important. If I'm going for a weekend up to the north, and Fiona, I'm one of those that was persuaded to go up after many years' absence, and you're right, it has so much to offer. I'm not going to decide that like today or tomorrow. Sorry, I'm a bit old-fashioned. I'll put a bit of research in, I'll have a little think about it. Maybe I need to save up a bit of money. I can't just book the places I want straight away. So when the message lands is, also very, very important. And I could go on, as you've gathered, at length about these 3 case studies. And these 3 case studies are only 3 out of the many that have reached those levels of excellence. And might have one more thing. Fiona hasn't mentioned, and I don't think it has been mentioned, that Fiona is also a winner of the Young Communications Professional Award as part of our Awards for Excellence. So I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Fiona on that too, because competition is equally fierce in that category.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations as well. I want to extend congratulations from my end too.
No, thank you. And it was like, I was completely overwhelmed by winning that award as well. And it's been such a brilliant process. I was lucky enough, we had a great session, a webinar with PRII to talk about it and to encourage other people to enter it. So it's definitely something I would massively encourage everyone to have a little look at. And even as you're starting out on your career, see what the category looks like, what the criteria is. It's really something to aim for a couple of years down the line. And it is something I always kind of had in the back of my head. Oh, I'd love to enter that, and and I did, and then I won it. So it's a great process, and yeah, really, really recommend it to anyone. And as I say, even when you're starting out in your career, think about those things now, and what if you maybe want to go for that in the future, what would you maybe what does your career path need to look like to go for it?
That's brilliant. Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of young PR would-be PR professionals that are watching, so it's brilliant to have that kind of advice. So thanks very much. Okay, brilliant. We'll have a look at some questions from the audience now, I suppose. Don't have a lot of time, so we'll try and get through them as quickly as we can. So I just have a question here that everyone can have a go of answering. So it's from an anonymous attendee. The question is, when working on a PR campaign, do you find yourself using similar tactics that you've maybe used in other campaigns that you've worked on, or do you try to stay away from repeating ideas? So Niamh, we might just start with you. What do you think of that?
Look, I think it's a mix of both. Over the years, you learn what works with the media, what doesn't work with media. So you do take those learnings into account. But you also have to set each campaign apart. And if you do the same thing all the time, then it just becomes boring. So it is, like as Martina said, it's about finding that nugget of creativity. It's about looking at the research and developing a strategy that works well for that particular client. So I suppose from our perspective, it's a mix of both,
Ciara, what do you think of that?
Yeah, definitely agree with Niamh there. It is definitely a mix of both. It depends. Like when you're talking tactics as well, there's a lot of tactics that the function remains the same, but the creativity around that function will change. So it really just depends. So for example, we had a campaign, and one of our tactics was to create a petition. So even though the petition was the tactic, and that that tactic was used again. So we created for another campaign a different petition, but the creativity around that, what the petition was about, what it was calling for. So the petition we found worked as a tool or as a tactic, but the creative around that was different. With a video, let's say you're releasing a video as part of your tactics. There's, so your tactics might stay if they're working, and you know that they work for you, but creativity can always be changed around that so that people don't think that they're getting the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you.
I would agree with that as well. I would say you wouldn't disregard a tactic just because you did use it in a previous campaign, because the way you deliver it and the creativity around it and the message might be completely different. Like, even, for example, spokespeople, and if it's a different spokesperson that you're pitching and around a different theme, then that might work really well. So I would say, in fact, it is kind of sometimes good to go back and look at, well, what worked before and how could we possibly maybe recreate that, but obviously with our different theme or our different message, our different creative, but that worked really well. So maybe we should do some of that again. And it is, sometimes you look at it holistically across all the different tactics that you could possibly bring to it, and it might be looking back on a successful campaign and thinking, well, that actually worked really well. Media really responded well to it, or digitally people responded well to it. So maybe we should bring in a flavour of that into this campaign as well. So I would say, it's definitely a mixture of both, but obviously repurposing it so that it doesn't just always look the same.
And Martina, to yourself, obviously you've worked on a lot of PR campaigns as well. Would you be agreeing? Do you find that you'd be using similar tactics that you've used before, or stay away from repeating ideas? Or
I'm no great fan of reinventing the wheel, and we're all too busy. I suppose I wouldn't start from there. I wouldn't start from looking at the tactics. As the pros will tell you, they've done their research. They know what problem, so to speak, they're trying to solve. They know who they're trying to reach. That will dictate what tactics they use. I mean, in some campaigns, perhaps a public affairs campaign, I don't need to reach 50,000, 100,000 people. I need to reach 6. So, in that case, my tactics are going to be completely different to another campaign. So the campaign, it's the objective of the campaign, the research that you've done, and who you're trying to reach, that will pretty much tie you into what the right tactics are. So they write themselves.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So we have a question here for Ciara from an anonymous attendee. So the question is, did you find that there was a lot of competition for coverage and exposure of the campaign as it was in the run-up to Christmas?
Yeah, well, as Martina pointed out earlier, we do a lot of research in our planning stages or pre-campaign stages, and that dictates when we'll go out. And as part of that, not only do we look at when is the right time to target people, but we also do take into consideration from a media perspective what else is going on. Now, with this particular campaign, we were targeting people before when they were even thinking about getting a dog. We wanted to ingrain that into their heads before their kids start asking them for a dog, so that they're able to say, have their reasons, or have something else lined up so that they can navigate around that situation. We didn't want that to happen on Christmas Eve, because there's not a lot you can do about it at that point. So we wanted that to go out very early in November, which is why we picked that date. Now, because of that, our coverage happened to land in early November, and there's not an awful lot of Christmas competition. Like, there's some, but there's not a huge amount that you'll begin to see come early December. So for us in this particular campaign, it wasn't really an issue for that reason. But with any campaign that we do, we definitely would factor in what competition there is around that time. We don't want our campaign to be going out the same week as something that might be huge. and there's a lot of learnings you can take from that, and we've learned the hard way a lot of times. Like, don't be afraid to do something, and then but always take that learning from it. You know, we released something last week on the back of Harry and Meghan's interview, and we kind of turned around and went, oh, how did we not see that coming? You know, it did land, but we got smaller pieces of coverage. Now, we probably would have gotten full to half pages of coverage had that not have taken up the first 8 pages of every paper. So, you know, we can look back, and it's really good to have that acknowledgement and to sit down with your team and go, do you know what, you know, we didn't see that coming, but for the next campaign, let's have a bigger think about what else could be potentially going on this week that we might have to look at, especially if it's industry related. But even if it's not, it's definitely something that you think might take up the first 8 pages of a paper. Probably best not put something out the day before that.
Just jumping in there, we actually launched the shop that nearly wasn't on the same week. We opened the shop on the same week as the general election.
Yeah.
So that was a decision that, you know, we hummed and hawed about for a long time, whether it was the right, you know, decision to make or not. But the fact was that we did feel that opening on World Cancer Day was going to give us the best chance of getting that national reach. So we took the gamble and we competed against that coverage. So sometimes, you know, it's so important to look at timings, but sometimes you just have to go with your gut and what you think is going to deliver for you.
Yeah. Or sometimes using it, you know, taking it on board and then almost using it as part of your messaging.
Yeah.
Or like we were launching our campaign at the start of January 2019, and Brexit, which has obviously been on everyone's radar for all of their campaigns, but particularly for Northern Ireland and the Tourist Board, Brexit has always been in the background for us, you know, in terms of timings. And the timescales just kept changing, and we weren't sure when it was going to be in the media, even more so or less so. So actually, as part of our Neil Delamere campaign, it ended up we were launching basically the same week where there was just something really big had happened around Brexit. So he was going on air to talk about Northern Ireland, while in the next programme on RTE, it was going to also be about Northern Ireland, but in a completely different context. So we actually built into his key messages almost a tongue-in-cheek way of, you know, saying, you know, bringing in Brexit in a much more playful manner, and about how obviously that was not going to affect your journey to Northern Ireland, things like that. So it's a matter of owning it sometimes as well, when it comes to timings.
Absolutely, yeah. I was actually planning to ask both of you about the general election and Brexit, but you're both completely ahead of me. So cheers, thanks very much.
Just on Fiona's point there very quickly, you're dead right, Fiona, and I should have mentioned as well that sometimes, yeah, it can work in your favor when especially when media are looking for things on a certain subject. So we always try and put things out around Easter, or, you know, like Christmas, Easter, and really play on those times of the year, Valentine's Day, you know, things where they're looking for content, media are looking for content, and if you can give them something really relevant and interesting, then you have a really good chance of landing. So it's looking at every avenue, really.
Absolutely. I know we're just over time. If we can, because there are a lot of questions, I was just saying if we could maybe just get one more kind of general question that everyone can have a chance to have a go at, just before we kind of wrap it up. Are you okay with that? Just answer one more question. Okay. So we just have a question here from Emmett that everyone have a go of, and I suppose might just start with Martina. So the question is, how important are social media strategies and tactics for a campaign?
They're as important as absolutely everything else, assuming you want to reach people who access those channels. So again, I don't differentiate between social and digital and so-called traditional media. They're all channels. They're not new anymore. It's horses for courses. You know, you might have a campaign which is totally online, but that'll be because you've made a strategic decision, and your research tells you that that's the optimum way to reach the people that you want to reach with a particular message. So they are as important as any other element, no more, no less, I put it like that. And I think it's important that we as a profession, we sort of stop putting these or constructing these walls between the different media channels. You know, as I said, it's horses for courses. There'll be times when, the Connacht Tribune is the most important media channel for, for this moment, for this client. If I nail that, they'll be so happy because it'll be in the right place. There'll be other times when, nothing short of 200,000 likes is going to satisfy a particular objective. So it's horses for courses. It's as important as everything else.
No. What do you think of that, Fiona? Social media strategies? How important?
I think Martina's really summed it up there. It just really depends on your campaign and how do you reach those audiences? And if it's through social media, then, that obviously would be part of your campaign. And I think as an industry, that's the way we need to look at things, that it isn't just, do we need a social strategy for this? It almost is approaching it in terms of, what does the research say? What are the objectives? Who are our audiences, and how are we going to reach them? But that is taking, I think, a little bit of time, and sometimes you have to bring clients on that journey as well, to show them that, social media is, we are building a social media around this because, and it sometimes does just take we have to paint that picture for them a little bit more than maybe we used to. But very much as a profession, it has come along, pardon the pun, come a long way. But sorry, I really didn't mean to do that.
That's a good one.
But yeah, so I think I really agree with what Martina said. And, a lot of the time, social will be part of it, but it's not to say that it will always be as well. It just really depends on your message and how you're going to reach the people that need to hear the message.
Absolutely. Niamh, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. Social media and PR are both about communication. So in order to elevate a campaign, I think it works well when both of those marry together. So say, for example, for the campaign we did for Breakthrough Cancer Research, we weren't normally managing their social media channels, but we took over those channels for the campaign from a messaging point of view. So we developed all of the messaging for social media so that it would complement what we were saying in PR. And we also worked with, the advertising team to ensure their messaging. So it's more about, consistent messaging across channels. And I think social is becoming more and more important for PR as well, that those two work together. And then as well, I think it depends, as everybody said, on what your campaign is. Like, we launched a campaign yesterday, the Paddy Irishman Project. Check it out on social media. And that campaign, we want that to live on social media. We want that to live on online channels more than anything, because that's what's going to give that campaign the reach. The column inches and the newspapers aren't quite as important for that. So again, social strategy is really important there. But I do think if you're doing a bigger campaign, then, communications teams need to push themselves forward to say, look, we'll manage the messaging here, even if we're not your dedicated social media agency. There's no point in having different voices going across your campaign. You need consistency.
I think integration is a key word in terms of anything that you do. Like, it all has to be integrated across all channels. There's no point in doing one thing on one channel and another if they don't marry up. So every single campaign you approach, think integration. Even if integration doesn't have to be, we need to have a whole ad campaign against this as well. Integration, even in the tools that you're using within your services to the client, or even if it's not within it, usually to just say, well, look, we need to make sure we're integrating with your other agencies, because there's no point in us going down this channel and this hole to do this whole messaging if it's not integrated across everything that you're doing. So and Niamh completely agree. Sometimes you have to take hold of the social channels, even if that's not usually your realm. It's necessary for your campaign to succeed. So you just need to put that forward and make sure that it's all integrated really.
And another important thing with social is to remember that each social media channel is so different in themselves as well. So you're not going to be putting the same content on Facebook as you would with Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram as well. So you're going to be putting different types of content up there. So it's just really important to tailor what messaging and what type of content you want to put on each channel in order to effectively reach the right audiences in the right way. And Facebook advertising is a good one as well. It's a very cost-effective way of marketing targeted audiences without having to put it. If you put something on your Facebook feed, remember you're only going to be reaching those people that are already know about you, that already follow you, that are probably already doing all the right things that you're asking. So, you know, if you're trying to reach the wider audience and especially a targeted audience, Facebook advertising can be very good for that as well.
Okay, brilliant. I think we're there really. We've gone 10 minutes over, so thanks very much to the four of you for agreeing to just answer that question. So yeah, thanks very much to the audience for putting in your questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to them. Thanks very much for putting them in anyway. The engagement has been fantastic, so we really appreciate it. As well, if the audience just want to stick around just very briefly, as I said, I'll just mention the other event that we're doing. But to Fiona, Ciara, Niamh, Martina, listen, thank you so much for being a part of today. Everyone in the course really appreciates it, and it's been great for me to have the privilege to talk to you today. So yeah, thanks very much for being a part of it.
I just want to say well done to all of you, you know, organising this event in MTU. Fantastic. And, you know, I think anyone who's listening in today or anyone in the industry would be only delighted to hire you. You know, you've shown real innovation and professionalism, and I'm sure everyone else will agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, absolutely.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.